Amy. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Sherry. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to get into this conversation. I want to admit that I don't know very much about natural medicine and herbs in general and how to utilize them. So it's so amazing to have an herbalist, an energy medicine educator, and a trauma-informed breathwork facilitator onto the show. And of course, you're a motivational speaker. And so
Mhm.
before we get into that, I want to learn how learning this and really embodying it and teaching it and getting into this practice helped you go from surviving to thriving.
Yeah, so like you and most people that live in our country, I did not know anything about medicine that wasn't traditional Western medicine. So I was raised in that system. I worked in that system. I worked at a big university here in New York with chronic pain patients. And then I began to resemble them. And I was like, the patients are in their 70s and I'm in my mid 20s. Something doesn't seem right here. But looking back, I had always had symptoms as a kid. I always had headaches and stomach aches. I was really picky about what clothing I wanted to wear, what food I would eat. Being around certain people didn't feel good. And the messaging that I received from that when I would talk to adults about it was that I was too sensitive
Huh.
and that I needed to grow a thicker skin and that I needed to just like suck it up, buttercup. And that was actually not helpful at all. But the messaging that I received was my body was not telling me the truth because I couldn't see it. So it wasn't real. And therefore I shouldn't believe it. And again, this was the messaging that was reaffirmed to me. And so having these experiences in my mid to late 20s, I was really uncertain what was going on because in our society, we're taught the body is broken. It acts up, you go to the doctor and they're going to fix you, right? They're going to take out a pill, a prescription pad, they're going to take a bunch of pictures, they're going to give you a standardized protocol. And so I knew all this because I had worked in the field of medicine. So it wasn't foreign to me. But what was really scary to me was that my body was failing increasingly at a very young age. And when I went to go see these doctors I had worked with for years, I was treated like every other patient. Here's your 15 minutes. Here's your prescription. Go get this blood work done. Get this picture taken. Here's the protocol. Come back when it gets worse.
Hmm.
And I was really pissed off. Like, I was like, what? You know who I am. Like, why are you treating me like I'm just a number? And any questions I would ask, and this went on for numerous doctors. Again, I live in New York, so there is not like I'm in the middle of nowhere. I went into Manhattan and I got the same answers in that nobody could identify what was going on. Again, it was always a standardized protocol of, well, this worked for somebody else. Why is it not working for you? There must be something wrong with you, again, was reaffirmed to me.
Mhm.
And so it really, at this time in my life, I was extremely frustrated. I couldn't leave the house. I had severe fatigue. I had severe vertigo and migraines on a daily basis. I wasn't sleeping. I had insomnia, to the extreme. I couldn't leave the bathroom. I couldn't eat anything, right? And it was all like, oh, this is all normal. I'm like, this is not normal. Like, there's something going on here. But because I was so sick and I was still indoctrinated in this idea that the doctor's supposed to fix you, I still kept giving my power away and going to another doctor, right? Like, you carry your briefcase of labs. I'm like, okay, maybe this doctor is going to figure it out when I show them everything. I had all of my notes, I had all my journals of like food and what I could eat, when I couldn't eat. And every time it was the same thing like, do this, take this pill, come back when it gets worse. I'm like, it's worse. Like, I'm dying. The pills are making me sicker. You're not doing anything different. None of the doctors would talk to each other because, again, our parts are parceled out in our system, right? So there's not like this approach where we look at the whole body unless you see a functional practitioner. And 20 years ago, there were no functional practitioners. Like, that did not exist. And even then, not every functional doctor is going to have the knowledge on every disease that exists. And when it's invisible, which most of autoimmune is, you're not seen, heard, or believed. And this is not a unique story, unfortunately. And this is why I give these interviews so that people know they're not alone. Like, listen, I went through the same thing just like you. And so I think it's important to make that point that this is not unique and it's actually getting only worse.
Mm.
And so it's important to pay attention.
Yeah, so good. A few things that you said just completely caught my attention, and it's
Yeah.
this idea that we're supposed to just accept what's going on with us, even though intuitively knows we know something is off, and we are told that this is normal. And this reminds me a lot of my story as well. This was back in around 2019. This was around the time my mom passed away, and it was an
Mm-hmm.
incredibly traumatic moment for me.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it was 6 years of trauma, really, because I had found out
Mm-hmm.
her diagnosis 6 years before she had passed away. I really kept it to myself. I owned a gym at the time. It wasn't a conversation that I wanted to have with anyone on a daily basis. And so I just shoved that in down really, really hard and just had to deal with that. And so I started developing a lot of gut health issues. I had changed my nutrition around that time, but something was off. And it was getting worse and worse, Amy. And it seemed like there was absolutely nothing I could eat that didn't set me off. I mean, fruits, vegetables, it was like things that I was also eating my whole life. Suddenly I just was reacting to. And so I kept going back to see my doctor, and I asked her first, can I get a food intolerance test? And she's like, no, 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 it's fine. It's just IBS. I'm like, all right, well, what does that even mean? Because IBS doesn't really mean anything. Like, so what should I do about that? She's like, just do a food elimination diet. I'm like, well, where do I even begin? Like, can I just have can I just understand what's going on? And then I went back to see her a few more times, and now I'm asking for a colonoscopy because again, something is off. And my mom passed away from colon cancer, and so this I'm not going to take lightly. Can I get a colonoscopy? Oh my goodness, Amy, I literally had to ask her 4 times at the appointment if I could get one, because she's like, no, you're too young, and no, it's not the time yet. You're not even 55 years old, and then we start this then, and then and all that. And so finally I got a colonoscopy, and then I ended up just taking my health into my own hands. I started looking up my own gut health tests and got into and learned about SIBO and the right supplements that I needed to really help me. And it wasn't from a doctor, it was really through me and years of experimenting and understanding until I finally found health and homeostasis. So it's so interesting that you're sharing that. And thank you also for, again, being the advocate around this.
Yeah, I mean, I can so relate to your story and I so feel for you because we spend years on this merry-go-round to nowhere, right? Again, trusting somebody who's the quote unquote expert because they went to medical school. But I want to let the listeners know that no one else is the expert on your body.
Yes.
Just because you're taught that you don't know because you didn't go to medical school, that's wrong. Because you live inside your physical body. You feel what's going on. And as you spoke in the beginning, like you kept pushing all of your emotions down. And we do that. That's a normal coping mechanism in our society because we fear what it's going to feel like if we have to meet it head on. And because we don't actually deal with it in the moment, we create stuck energy in the body. This is what leads to disease. And when you have years of trauma of not feeling what's going on in your body, not, dealing with what's happening in your world, you're creating layers and layers and layers of stuck energy. And so it has nowhere to go. So the body is going to try to give you messages to indicate there's something you need to pay attention to because we're not taught in school how the body works. We're not taught in school how to trust the body. We're not taught that the body's designed to heal, to
Right.
bring us back into balance. Like we're not taught any of these things, right? And unfortunately, like you and I, we had to learn it the hard way. It was for me over a decade of doing my own research, being my own guinea pig, just like you, and seeing what worked and what didn't. And the toughest with that is that just because something worked 5 years ago does not mean it's going to work now
Yes.
because the body is constantly processing what can be cleared. But if you're not stopping to allow it to occur, it can't actually do what it needs to do because it's either going to fight or it's going to heal. It can't do both. So if you're surrounded in a world filled with toxins, which we are, and surrounded in very negative environments, which we are, and so having trauma, and again, trauma is not always this big idea like your mom passing away. Yes, that's very traumatic, but also it can be little t trauma that keeps happening. Trauma is not the event; it's the body's response to the event, and you have no control over that. It's not a logical thing. So Sherry and I can have the exact same experience. Like I live on Long Island, traffic is horrendous. I have trauma just leaving my house because of the traffic.
I would
And
too.
that creates like issues in the body where I want to not leave the house because I don't want to deal with what's going on the road. And so this constant continual behavior that occurs where we don't deal with our stuff creates more stress on the body. And then the body, quote unquote, acts out, but it's not. It's trying to let you know that there's a problem, but we want to numb out. We want to use social media, Netflix, food, alcohol, drugs, shopping to not deal with these things. But actually, you're just kicking the can down the line.
So good.
So it gets to the point where you have to deal with it, right? Like you had to deal with it. I had to deal with it. You could choose to keep ignoring it, but your body will just physically stop and you will die, right? And so that's what was happening to me. And so I had to learn about trauma. You know, I took 5 years doing trauma research, and then I did a trauma training, and I still was not in my physical body because it did not feel safe. And that's most people. We're numb from the neck down. Like we just all are the mind, but the mind is simply just part of the body. It's not the whole end all be all.
So good.
And we forget that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. Two words that I want to address and expand
Yeah.
on. The two words are trauma, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then safety. Because
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we understand these words, right? And trauma,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, most of us have this vision in our mind that it's something huge, right? It
Mm-hmm.
is massive abuse, whether that's sexual or physical or verbal. And
Mm-hmm.
we can actually come back and relate to maybe a physical pain when we've
Mm-hmm.
actually endured that trauma. But what we don't
Mm-hmm.
actually also realize is trauma can also be through dieting. Dieting is
Mm-hmm.
actually a form of trauma. We are actually
Mm-hmm.
starving ourselves. We're creating restrictions for ourselves, and that triggers
Mm-hmm.
the part of the nervous system that's going to result in self-sabotage. And then the need to
Mm-hmm.
cope, as you just shared, through food
Yes.
or through
Yeah.
drugs and other things.
Right.
And then the word safety, I also think, Amy, is misunderstood because
Mm-hmm.
just like you just said, I feel safe in my body. Again, a person who's struggling with their weight or very disconnected with their body, very not
Mm-hmm.
okay or feeling flawed in some way is also not feeling safe. And
Mm-hmm.
anytime we're not feeling safe, we're triggering that part of the nervous system. And so
Mm-hmm.
can you also expand on that and what you've noticed as well around just people maybe acknowledging trauma in their lives?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So in my experience and with the experience that I've seen in other people is that because we don't take the time to stop and feel our feelings and our sensations that are coming up from the body, right? Like emotion is just energy and motion. Again, everything that exists in the world is energy. So if you're not actually aware of what's going on around you and actually allowing the body to process, which it can only do when it is in a rest and digest state, right? So which is parasympathetic,
So
which
good.
is the two branches of the nervous system. So if it's in sympathetic, which is where most people spend most of their life, right, is that fear, flight, freeze response or fawn, it also is creating so much destruction. But what happens is, even if you're watching a violent movie, you could experience a trauma response
Yes.
because your body does not know that you're not physically actually experiencing that. The body does not know the difference. The body does not know the difference between past and present. So you could be going to talk therapy and talking about the same story over and over and over again. You are re-traumatizing the system. You are creating more trauma in the system. And so if you're not actually doing the work in the physical body, you're not going to actually heal those levels of past energy, suck energy. And it can be inherited because energy, again, is passed on. So you can inherit it from family members, you can inherit it from culture, right? Like war, if you survive war, if you had family members who survived war, I mean, now with my generation, I'm like, whatever, the end of the millennials, I'm 41. I've known war most of my life. I wasn't in war, but I've seen visions of war most of my life. Gen Z has never had a time where our country has not been at war. Their body's in a constant trauma response, but nobody talks about it.
Right.
And that's why I talk about it so much because, again, like you said, people don't understand what trauma is. It can just be traffic and
Mhm.
it creates a trauma response. You
Mhm.
know, you and I could have the same experience. Your body, you allow your body to process it. You stop, you breathe through it, you can, okay, this is what it is right now, this is not, I'm safe in the moment, right? Bringing awareness back to the physical body and allowing the body to process the way it was designed to do. And I just freak out, I continue driving, I continue on my day, I never process it. It creates another level of trapped energy. And so again, it's not logical. There is no like, oh, that happened, that's traumatic, and that wasn't. You don't get to decide, the body decides.
Yes.
And so when you don't know how the body works, you're not going to understand that. And if you don't feel safe to be in the physical body, so everybody has what's called protectors.
Mhm.
These form in childhood to keep you quote unquote safe. But again, these protectors keep you safe, but they can keep you stuck. So if you're trying to lose weight, if you're trying to break habits, if you're trying to do new behaviors, the protectors will keep you safe because that's survival. The body just wants you to live. It doesn't care if you're thriving. It just wants you to live. So as long as you are alive, That's all it's concerned about. So it doesn't like change. Change is scary. Change is uncertain. It doesn't want new behavior. That's really scary to the body. And protectors are normal. Everybody has them. Most people have like a predominant one. So I have the comic, like I'll make jokes because I don't want to deal with what's
Mhm.
going on.
Yeah.
I'll also aggress because I was bullied, a lot as a kid. So I'll be aggressive. Or, sometimes I just need to numb out. And this is not a mental illness. This is not bipolar disorder. This is not something that's wrong with you. Everybody has this. It's your basic biology. It's the awareness of
Mm.
what's going on. So when I'm triggered and my husband comes home and I don't know and I'm throws me off, rather than immediately reacting, which is what I would normally do, right? I can stop and have the awareness of, why is this bothering me? Oh, because I didn't know. And I don't like not knowing things. I like
Mm.
to be prepared, right? So it's bringing this awareness back. Okay, so I'm in traffic. This person cut me off. Why is this bothering me? Because I didn't feel safe in that moment. I felt like I was going to get into an accident, right? So again, it's practice of awareness. It's not mindset. Mindset work is not enough for healing, because again, that's solely just in the mind. It takes
Yes.
more than mindset work to heal. You need to have a whole body approach. And if you're not dealing with all aspects of the body, mind, body, and spirit, you're not going to have that healing happen. And there's different components of that as well: spiritual, emotional, physical, mental, and energetic. And again, all those components need to be addressed.
Mhm.
So for 35, 37 years, I didn't feel safe to be in my physical body. So I did everything in my head. And I call this manic healing in my self-help book of like, you're just going to keep doing all the things and you're going to do more of the things thinking it's going to work. But it doesn't, because it just creates this manic energy. It's another form of resistance. And then that energy cannot be used to heal.
So
But
good.
when you find the ability to land back into the body and allow the body to do what it was designed to do, and to trust that the body knows better than the mind, then the healing can occur.
So good. So good. I love that. And everything that you just explained makes us realize how we are not just the physical body. We're not just our thoughts. We're not just our emotions. In fact, it's all related. They're all interrelated. And so, to your point, if you're going to start your healing process, then you also have to work on your physiology as well. It's not just your thoughts. It's not just what's going on in your mind. And it's not just about accountability and willpower and discipline to really move past that. And it's so true what you said also earlier about movies. I'm actually very particular around what I watch, what I
Yep.
allow myself to actually experience with my
Ingest.
eyes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't realize this. Like if I watch a scary movie, to your point, my body doesn't know if it's real, if it's happening or not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
engaged in that movie. I'm crying. I'm feeling sad.
Mm-hmm.
I may even feel sad for another 24 hours because I'm still
Mm-hmm.
thinking about this movie. And the same thing
Mm-hmm.
with scary movies. And so it's great
Mm-hmm.
to question, well, what do I expose myself to? Because whatever we watch, whatever we hear, whatever conversations we sit in is also part of our diet, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
everything
Yeah.
influences everything in the body. And energy, as Newton said, cannot be created nor destroyed. So it's always there,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when even people say that women are so emotional, and like, why are women so emotional? And they're always crying and you're so emotional and so sensitive. Well, we are also carrying the energy of
Mm-hmm.
thousands of years of repression, of abuse. And this is, from our parents, our grandmoms, our great, 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 great grandparents. I mean, this has been
Mm-hmm.
going on through time and it is
Mm-hmm.
transferred. And so
Mm-hmm.
energy, even though it cannot be created or nor destroyed, can though be transferred. So it can be transmutated, and it could even end up, as you said, manifesting as dis-ease. And that's so
Yes.
interesting. And I feel like it's so important to have this conversation, because when we are looking for the reasons as to why we're maybe experiencing certain symptoms that just can't be alleviated through natural allopathic medicine, let's say, then maybe we have to actually look at, well, what else is behind that? Let's address
Mm-hmm.
the emotional body. Let's address the energetic body. And I know this is some of the work that you do too, Amy. So
Yes.
maybe you can
Yes.
expand a little bit around that. If we are actually going to address energy in the body and learn how to release that energy, what can that look like?
So I want to touch on a point real quickly about that. So energy can't be destroyed or created, but it can be altered,
Yes.
right? So you can
Yes.
create a positive healing frequency in your body. So most people, their polarity is running opposite of the healing,
Mm.
the direction you want it for healing. So energy medicine techniques, again, is another ancient system of healing that's been around for thousands of years, just like plant medicine. And the reason it's been around so long is because it works. right? Where modern day Western medicine has only been around for 100, not even 100 years yet. It's like 1930s, 1940s, right? So I want people to understand that what you consider medicine these days is not actually what medicine has been for a really long time. And so the system we're in right now is a sick care system. It advocates for you staying disempowered, advocates for you looking outside of yourself and trusting somebody else over your own innate wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And every person on this planet has the innate wisdom within them to heal. It's just you have to trust in what you can't see. And that's what energy medicine did for me, is because even doing plant medicine for a long time, I still would plateau in my healing. I was like, I don't understand what's happening. One, I was still stuck in my head. I wasn't feeling anything from the neck down. And two, I was not aware of how I could alter my healing with changing my energy frequency. So Donna Eden, is a big proponent of energy medicine techniques. She's got a bunch of books. She has YouTube channels. I started watching her watching her videos, reading her books, and I started doing energy medicine. And then they created energy yoga. And so again, it's working with the meridians of the body, which speaks to traditional Chinese medicine, which another system has been around for thousands of years. And so these systems are ancient healing, but they have all of the information that modern day medicine is only catching up to now. Like, just think with that for a second. Like, this has been around for thousands of years and they had it figured out. And we had to create this other system that's based on money and a sick care system, not on you being well. And so my approach with people is I try to make it, a back to basics approach. It's as simple as it can be, because healing is simple in theory. It's not easy. It's very hard to do because we get in the way with our head, right? But it is very simple in that the premises are not complicated. And a lot of people, when I have sessions with them, they're like, oh, that's too simple. That's not going to work. I'm like, well, could you try it? Because I thought that too. But it can be that simple.
Mm-hmm.
The hard part is not letting your brain call the shots,
Mm-hmm.
because actually the brain does not call the shots. The body communicates first to the brain. So if I'm thirsty, it's my body telling my brain that I'm thirsty, I need to drink something. If I'm tired, it's my body telling my brain. It is not my brain telling my body. It is my body telling my brain. And so we have it backwards in our society. But when you look at these ancient healing systems, they don't have it backwards. They have all of the wisdom there. And so when I started to integrate energy medicine and plant medicine, I saw a lot more shifts. And that allowed me to be open to that spiritual aspect in mind, body, spirit healing. Because for me, that was a foreign concept of, like, I was not raised religious. I was not religious. I didn't understand what that meant. To me, surrender was a dirty word. It meant that you were quitting, that you were giving up. There was something wrong with you. You were broken, right? You were the anomaly. So this idea of like surrendering to something I could not see and asking for help was a very foreign concept. And it took me a really long time to wrap my brain around it. And it's like the dark moment when you're on the bathroom floor crying, and like, you feel like you're in a like Elizabeth Gilbert book of like, what do I do next? That's exactly what happened to me. But I was in my closet and I was like, I'm done. I don't know what to do anymore. I can't do this anymore. And just asking for help,
Wow.
it felt a little lighter. And I was like, but I didn't think that in the moment, right? Like, again, as hindsight's 2020, it was just, I was desperate and I didn't know what else to do. And I couldn't go on the way I was going on. But when I remember, even now, years later, when I remember and things are hard and I'm like, hey, I need a little help here. Could you offer an assist? Like, could you jump in? Just knowing I can rely on something outside of me, but also that is within me, to ask for help, to have that guidance and support, it comes a long way. And to be able to be supported by somebody and trust that I can be seen, heard, and believed for what I have going on. That's been really huge too, because healing, you can't do it by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, believe me, I tried to heal by myself for 10 years. I did all the things. I'm like, I'm not trusting any of the doctors. I'm going to do everything myself. And you can only achieve a certain level of healing because you really need to have that safe space that you were asking about. And so sometimes the idea of safety can freak people out. Like, oh, how can you hold a safe space for me over the computer? Again, speaks to energy, in that there's a collective energy and everything is connected and related and integrated. You just cannot see it, right? And so I don't always say the word safe. I've tried to kind of move away from that because sometimes that can trigger people. And being trauma informed, I'm trying not to trigger people because I don't want to create more trauma. So I say I'm holding you in a supportive space,
Mm.
or this is a confidential space, something that feels aligned with that individual that I'm supporting at that time. And it's allowing you to build the safety for yourself. And the approach I use is breath work because it's nothing new.
Mhm.
It's something you've been doing your whole life. You don't have to go anywhere to do it. It's free. Like, that's it. But because we don't actually do intentional breathing, we don't stop and actually take deep breaths when we're feeling stressed out. Like you said, we push it down, we numb out, our protectors come online, we aggress, we do an addictive behavior, we binge watch, we binge eat, whatever that may be, right? Pick your poison, you play victim, you shame, you blame somebody else, you guilt somebody else, right? You take the spotlight off yourself. But when you can actually allow the body to do what it was designed to do, I found the easiest way is breath. There's no agenda. There's no storytelling. You are just breathing to a playlist and I'm holding space for you. Like that's as simple as it is. And people are like, "Oh, nothing's going to happen there." And then, I've had a lot of skeptics do it and they're like, "Oh my God, that was crazy." I'm like, "I know, because your breath is so powerful."
Right.
People who have done ayahuasca have done breath and they're like, "Oh my God, breath work was more powerful than,
Right.
these plants I use." And I said, "I know, I don't need to do that because I can feel the power with my breath." And it strengthens your intuition, that connection that you have to your inner wisdom.
Mm.
And then you're not going to look outside of yourself as much because you're going to be safe with the answers that you find within.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So good. So good. So much to unpack there. And I couldn't agree more about breath work and really just addressing breath in general. So, throughout our conversation so far, we've talked about the nervous system and we talked about how the nervous system is triggered. And when we are in fight or flight or freeze, then that's where we can start to self-sabotage, as we just shared.
Mm-hmm.
But what we also don't realize or are aware of is that depending on whether we are in rest or digest or in sympathetic state, the breath matches too. And so
Mm-hmm.
by manipulating the breath, we can reverse and inversely manipulate the nervous system. So instead of just, for example, trying exercise or trying other type of tools to really help reverse that nervous system simply by applying breath, it is that powerful. And I find that most people tend to just disregard or dismiss something that's simple, right? And I see this often too. Well, what do you mean I'm just going to sit and breathe, or I'm just going to sit and meditate and that should immediately change my state, right? And what I notice, Amy, is whatever we resist ends up persisting, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so whether it is that emotion, let's say my experience that I shared earlier, that was 6 years of anger, frustration, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of sadness, a lot of fear, all cooped up into one big ball. And I kept
Mm-hmm.
resisting that. And I kept resisting that because you're right. I didn't want to deal with it. I decided I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
deal with it after my mom passes away. I'm not going to address the fact that she's ill right now. And so
Mm-hmm.
by avoiding it, it just ended up resulting in aggression because that's energy. I mean, the emotions
Mm-hmm.
are there. The more we avoid it, the more we resist it, the more it grows. And then it has to come out somehow. And so it comes out in
Mm-hmm.
aggression. Either I'm yelling or I'm angry. It comes out in aggression through food. It comes out aggression through needing to cope somehow. And
Mm-hmm.
so this is so important. And I love this conversation again because it is so simple. But what
Mm.
I think we dismiss everything that is simple, thinking that there must be a more complicated and expert advice somewhere.
Yeah, humans want to make it harder on themselves. Like that's just human tendency, right? We have this negative bias. Everything needs to be hard and it needs to hurt and it needs to be really painful. But actually, speaking to what you were saying, like I couldn't meditate, right? So I was like, I got to do this meditation thing because I need to bring myself back into a rest digest state. I need to, bring myself into a healing state because when you're stuck in chronic pain and chronic illness, you're in a perpetual freeze state.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you could do everything and anything under the sun. And until you get out of that freeze state, nothing will work.
Same
But
thing with
nobody,
weight loss.
again, like
Same
it's
thing
not
with weight
talked
loss.
about,
Yeah.
right? And so the thing is, like, you're in this constrictive state where your body is just concerned with survival and just nothing else makes a difference. And so if it thinks that meditation is going to bring up subconscious memories that you don't have the skill set to deal with, or you're not supported in order to handle that, it won't let you meditate. So I couldn't meditate. I would struggle with it. And then when I started doing breath work in my physical body, because I practiced breath work for years, but I used it as a way to get out of my physical body. And I was like, oh, I'm coming back down. Why does it feel so much worse? And then I would feel worse for days after. But when I actually felt supported and able to land back into my physical body, like 35 years later, it felt different. But then everything caught up that I had did only in my mind, because I was landing in my physical body and everything was integrating together. And that's why we say meditation is great for people who can't meditate, because and breath work is great for people who can't meditate. I'm sorry. The thing is there's no rules in breath work. Like, you don't have to sit in one position. You can move, you can yell, you can scream, you can shake, you can rock. There are no rules here. There is no agenda. We're going to target from age 5. Like, that does not happen, because there's a freedom and a trust factor that the body knows what can be healed. The body knows what can be released and transmuted up. The body knows what is ready to be released out of the system. That is not a logical thing.
Right.
That is a biology thing. And so when it's simple, but it's not always easy to trust that. And so a lot of times when people start, when I talk to them about breath, they're like, oh, that thing, breath work. I'm like, it actually is, like, just try it. Right. So let's just try it right now. Like, wherever you are, as long as you're not driving or operating heavy machinery, just take a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth, and feel the belly inflate as you inhale and feel the belly pull in as you exhale. That's proper breathing. Some people do it backwards because, again, you don't not taught how to breathe, right? And so just do that a few times and see what it might feel a little weird. You might feel lightheaded. You might feel like, oh my God, what's this thing? I don't understand. I can't breathe. I feel like there's something stuck here. I can't move past this point. That's normal. Everything that can happen is normal. You can have sensations of temperature changes. You can have body physical sensations happen. That's because you're not used to breathing that deeply. So you have more carbon dioxide in the system. So you might have muscle contractions, so all of these things happen. They're normal, but it's the way the body is processing out the energy. And so breath work is really important in my approach, because it allows people to feel what it feels like to be in the physical body. It allows them to let the mind rest, but it also builds back a trust to the innate wisdom that's within.
So good.
And it allows for curiosity. So when I start a session with breath, after I then make suggestions of, hey, maybe you want to check out this book. Hey, you maybe want to look into this, whatever, right? This homeopathic remedy, this plant medicine, this other idea that I have for you. And there's no pressure. It's just suggestions. But because you're in a different state, you're more receptive. So you're open to something differently. Where if I started out a session with that, people were like, no, I'm good, thanks. That's why I start with breath, because it allows for you to be in the physical body, to connect that that intuition, your inner wisdom, and think, oh, maybe I'll try that. Yeah, like, what's the harm? It's really not a big deal. Or, I'll say, like, maybe you should be mindful of what you're ingesting visually, audibly, food, what you're putting on your body. Your skin is your largest organ. How you're spending your time. You're spending your time on a lot of screens. There are like 5 tips that I offer for everybody that I think are really important. And one of them is breath, but another one is sleep. Another one is getting outside. Another one is being aware of what you ingest, right? And it's an awareness is the overall picture of not moving through life on autopilot. We have a Groundhog Day every day. Oh, same thing, like this routine. But the routine is actually really destructive because it allows for rote behavior. So there's no conscious thought. But when you bring awareness, you bring back conscious thought. Is this decision actually serving me? Is this behavior actually serving me? Is this relationship actually serving me? And then you can be curious about it. That's the hard part.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's simple.
Yeah. And I love everything that you said. And actually, when I have people start meditating, even for just 5 minutes, all I have them do is observe their breath. Because oftentimes that's like the first time they've actually noticed their breath, or noticed the fact that they can't expand through their belly, right? Like they've been chest breathing for so long. And so it really is that simple. And it's something that we can all start and all practice. And One thing I want to actually come back to before maybe we end our conversation. So something that you said earlier really stuck to my mind. And I also want to tread so cautiously when we have this discussion, because I am so aware that a lot of people do go into therapy and they get the right support that they need. But something that you said, Amy, I couldn't agree with more. And it's this repetition of the traumatic experience. And this is something I've observed. I'm just going to say this as a curious eye. It's something I've observed with most of the women who've done therapy in the past, who come into our
Mhm.
program, Make Peace with Food, where we help women actually shift their nervous system to help them release weight versus actually addressing diet and movement and all of that.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
most of them have been in therapy for not years, but for decades.
Mhm.
And what I noticed is that they have an insane level of awareness. They can tell you where their triggers are, they can tell you what their emotions are, they can even tell you what ends up happening and how they turn towards food for that. But they're never
Mhm.
really handed the tools.
Mhm.
And I also noticed that for certain types of therapies, you go in addressing one thing, but all you do is dig in layers and layers and layers and layers of things that have happened in the past. And I truly believe that the more energy we give something, the more life we give to it. And then the greater the issue becomes, and the more we think about it, the more that it's present. And now we are operating from that perspective. And now the whole view of the world starts to change, because now it's relative to that experience that we had. And again, this is not to
Mhm.
dismiss or disregard anybody who's gone through major trauma, or again, who's seeking and receiving the proper type of support through therapy. But
Mhm.
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a lot, so I'm going to keep it to a minimum. So, I mean, I have good friends who are therapists. I was in therapy for a long time and I did not see the benefit of it. I kept telling the same story, nothing would get revised, and I would keep, and then it wound up being I went up therapy my therapist, and I was like, something's wrong here that I have more skills than you. And I think there's such an issue in our society that mental health is not giving the credence, right? And the only suggestion given for mental health is to see a therapist or to take a pill, and it's lacking the awareness of the disconnection between the mind and the body, because as you're talking with these women who have awareness, but all they're focusing on is the meaning making. Let me make this rational so I can wrap my head around it, and then I'll understand why it happened. The body is not concerned with that. The body just wants you to be physically present in the moment.
Mm,
And when you choose to continue not to do that, again, I also agree there's a time and place that some people do need therapy, but when you are not addressing all components of the body, the mind, the body, and the spirit, you cannot achieve healing of any kind. Whether
mm,
that's mental illness, whether that's addiction, writing, culture, whatever that is, chronic pain, chronic disease, you need to address all systems of the body. And because in our society we live so disconnected from ourselves and from each other, we do not have the skill set to do that. And there are not enough people who are trauma informed. And unfortunately, I have, like I said, friends who are therapists who will reach out to me and be like, I have this difficult patient. What should I do with them? I'm like, breath work. You should do breath work with them because it will bring them back into their physical body.
right.
And again, I went to school for this for a very long time, and I can now see it from a different angle and see nobody goes wanting to hurt other people, but unfortunately, the way that the system is set up, again, is a sick care system, and it is not wanting you to be healthy.
Right.
It wants you to be reliant on somebody else. It wants you to be reliant on listening to someone else as an expert and not believing that you have the answers within. And so my messaging is that you get to choose what's best for you.
Yes.
You get to choose the approach that feels good to you and that actually makes a difference. And the difference doesn't need to be tangible. It
Mm,
can just be a feeling.
mm,
And it's all about the small steps. It's not these large jumps. It's not these large goals. In healing, it has to be very small. It has to be extremely small, and it's tailored to each person because each person is unique and has had different experiences which have led them to where they are today. And so it is not a standardized protocol like CBT, standardized protocol. You know, Jungian theory, standardized protocol. But if you do interfamily systems, which is something I recommend to people, that works on your protectors, it works on your parts. That's Dr. Dick Schwartz. He developed that. But like I did EMDR, and that's supposed to be great
mm,
for trauma, and actually it caused me more trauma
right.
because my therapist didn't have the right skills. And a lot of other people I've worked with and in my trauma trainings had issues with EMDR. So again, standardized protocols are the enemy, in my opinion. And you need to find something that works. And that could be a mishmash. Like that's what I did. Like I just took all these different aspects.
Yes.
And again, it's not, it looks different every day, right? Like it has similar components, but it changes as my healing progresses.
Mm,
And I want on an end note to remind people, and this may not be fun to hear, but this healing will happen as long as you are in this physical body.
mm,
It's what you signed up for as a soul. It's what you decided
mm.
to come and experience as a human. You chose to have this. And as long as you are in the physical body, things will be coming up. So I never lead with that I'm healed or I'm cured because it's a fallacy. Because as long as I'm in this physical body, I will be dealing with someone's shit, whether it's my own or inherited, right? Like that's just the way that it is. And so the quicker you can accept that, the quicker you can move along with healing, right? Like the belief systems is what gets in our way of
So
what
good.
it should look like. Yeah.
I love that. I love that so much. And the journey is never done. And when we look at fitness, when we look at our healing journey, and it's all very similar in that we need to be in
Mm-hmm.
parasympathetic nervous state, which I refer to as safety mode, really for the body to heal and for us to be
Mm-hmm.
receptive of all these things. And what I love the most, Amy, about this conversation is you're talking about acceptance of things that we have to surrender to. And I could not agree more. And then you're also talking about not accepting that feeling of disalignment. Like when you know something is off in your body, that you also don't accept whatever diagnosis you get, whatever someone else told you, but you
Mm-hmm.
actually continue to be curious and you search for the solution. And so I love this conversation so much. And I want to thank you so much for your time. And if somebody wanted to reach out to you, to connect
Mm-hmm.
with you, to learn more about your work, where could they go to do that?
So they could grab the free gift. It's a guided breath session. It's 20 minutes, and they can experience what it feels like to have that power within them and be open to whatever comes through, the magic that exists with breath.
So generous. And we're going to add that into the show notes. And again, if you want to refer people out, let's say to an Instagram or social, where could people go to follow you?
So mindbodyspiritbreath.com is my main site. I do have a YouTube channel that is back to basics, right? So it's very simple, healthy recipes, but they are not complicated. I actually show you how to grow medicinal garden,
Oh,
how
wow.
to grow your own food. I do a lot of workshops in person teaching people how to make their own medicine, how to eat your weeds, about foraging. So these are all back to basic skills that we've gotten away from. And when you actually can see the brilliance that Mother Nature provides and work with her, you work with your body, not against it.
So beautiful. We'll definitely add all those resources as well. Thanks again, Amy. I really love this conversation.
Thanks, Sherry.